Just need a second to load it. Sure. I'll introduce myself. My name is Mike McBride, and actually part of this presentation, which will start here, comes as a result of a class that I teach, that I taught in punk. I went to SIU with Chris and Keegan, and when I wanted to put together a class on the punk movement, I ended up consulting them because they know comics better than I do. In terms of the punk movement, what I was interested in was this kind of period of time during the Cold War that it seems like it kind of disappeared from the history books. We have Revolutionary War, Civil War, World War II, Vietnam, and 9/11. And so now the Cold War kind of disappeared. So I wanted to really look at like literature, the art, the film of that period, and of course the music. And so that was kind of the core of the class. We were going to do zines, which are low-budget publications, magazines, or self-produced in the class, and I wanted to do text for that class that would kind of mirror that. And I think Keegan and Chris agreed. Chris ends up actually offering this book called Binky Brown and the Holy Virgin Mary, and never read it. It's from '72. It's about a boy dealing with maturity, puberty, hallucinating his hands, appendages, and everything is turning into penises. So, when I hear that, I go, this is the perfect book for my class. Because the punk movement is all about penises, offensive language, and the like, and do it yourself, like Chris was talking about. So anyway, that's kind of where I'm coming from here. Yes, punk is about rebellion and revolution, but I see kind of the offensive kind of call for attention in a lot of the imagery, the art, the music, and of course the comics. We need to get a little background here real quick. There's a couple basic assumptions, and I realize these are somewhat contentious, and you can tear me apart for them later if you'd like. But one, I say the comics movement, comics with the X being the underground stuff, really starts in the 20s and 30s with the 8-pagers, or Tijuana Bibles, or Jiggs and Maggie books, or JoJo books, or 2x4s, or whatever regional name they have for them. I also contentiously claim that punk begins in 1963 in the U.S., and I'll kind of explain that in a minute. I know there are some purists that will say, no, the UK. Additionally, the first comics with the X that kind of look like the stuff that we see Crumb do, and Justin Green and Spiegelman and those guys later, that are easily recognizable as that type are 62 and 64, The Adventures of Jesus, and Mountain Rose, and you'll see a little bit about that. Important dates, timelines, context is important, of course. So the 20s, some critics will say that the 8-pagers begin before the 20s. Some say they were alive and well during World War I, and that these were entertainment for the troops and that kind of thing. I don't know. The most important thing for me is that they are hitting good stride by the 30s and 40s when Spiegelman, when Crumb, when Justin Green are born. And so they certainly grew up with these, and I have a couple quotes that kind of back that up also. In the 40s, like I said, we have the three major comics creators there. 50s, Mad Comics comes about. It's also the era of the Senate appeals against comics. That's 54, there's a couple of them that happen. And then the establishment of the Comics Code in 56. And what comes after that is as a reaction to, the Comics Code prevents a lot of the language and the different things that people want to do. In the 60s, then we have comics proper begin, The Adventures of Jesus, God Knows Fritz the Cat, Zach #1, and Robert Crumb also has some fabulous titles, Jizz Snatch and Print Comics. So that's 1960. If you've never seen 8-pagers and Tijuana Bibles, this is what they look like. They almost exclusively deal with famous people, cartoon characters, actors, actresses, politicians, generally having sex, because that's, I guess, what was titillating at the time. They are generally 8 pages long, cheaply done, crudely thrown together, sold very inexpensively on street corners, usually kind of behind the counter, kind of like porn is in some places now. And Popeye was a favorite. Why he is trying to have sex with a box labeled erotic acid poison, I don't know, but that's kind of the thing we're talking about. This, the one in the upper right is Elastic Man, so that's obviously a little bit later than some of the other ones I was pointing to. But Spiegelman, talking about Tijuana Bibles and the introduction to the collection on them, says the Tijuana Bibles weren't a direct inspiration for most of us, meaning the underground comics people of the 60s and 70s. They were a precondition. That is, the comics that galvanized my generation, the early Mad, the horror and science fiction comics of the 50s, were mostly done by guys who had been in their turn worked by these little books. And without the Tijuana Bibles, there never would have been a Mad magazine. And without Mad, there wouldn't have been any iconoclastic underground comics in the 60s. So even Spiegelman saying, like, these made Mad, Mad made us, and we're kind of infused by those. He further goes on to then say, and this is a quote, the fuck books were not overtly political, but were by their very nature anti-authoritarian. And I mean, you can see, it undercuts what would have been acceptable at the time for sure. And of course, anything that's somewhat subversive is automatically anti-authoritarian. And thus, in my mind, it parallels and fits nicely with the punk movement. Cut over here real quick. So this is the Adventures of Jesus, and this is God Knows. Less sex, but we do have Jesus inadvertently asking the cops for a hit of marijuana. We have God over here doing some rather sacrilegious things as well. And so you see kind of the beginning of this underground comics movement that's willing to subvert kind of, the standard comic book. And one last one. So Skip Williamson, who works with Crumb and Jay Lynch, says in this 1984 interview that one of the most important lessons about the underground comics movement is essentially a bunch of guys got together and said the comic book establishment's not going to let us publish because of the comics code. They're not going to let us do the kind of fantasies we want to put on paper. So we're going to have to go out and do it ourselves and sell them on the street corner. And that's exactly what they do. So the underground comics movement, even by their estimation, is an exact replication of kind of what was going on with the 8-pagers. And for me, it's this anti-authoritarian nature of the 8-pagers. It's the do-it-yourself kind of attitude to make it happen. And it links with the punk music. It's kind of mirroring that as well, which we'll get to here. So for me, the starting point for punk is the Fugs. And they are not necessarily a mainstream punk band. They don't really sound punk in the way that we would hear like the Sex Pistols. I'm going to say something about it in a second. But you can see, well, I can't really read the title very well. Their album is officially called The Village Fugs, sing ballads of contemporary protest, point of views, and general dissatisfaction. The song titles we have, I Couldn't Get High, Moves a Lot, We Are the Fugs, and CIA Man, which I have a very short clip of, just to kind of give you a sense of their sound. I have no idea.